I think some definitions of the open web are, very contingent on technical qualities. Things like, is it open source? Can you get at the source code? And that's certainly, I get that validity. And then there's people who talk about it in terms of things like open standards, which I think is getting closer to a real prerequisite for practice, in the sense, if somebody is doing something on the web over here and I'm over there, how easy is it for me to adopt the technology they're using and use it for my own purposes? I have, in some ways, an incredibly simple-minded and personal definition of the open web, which goes back to my introduction to it when I was teaching in the late 1990s. My first teaching job was in Mexico. It was at a fairly technologically advanced institution, but I had never taught before, and this thing called the internet was still relatively new back then in terms of teaching and learning. But what I realized back then was, because so many people back then were sharing what they were doing online, and back then most of what they were sharing used fairly readily available or low-cost technologies, that it was pretty easy to take what they were sharing. As a new teacher in a new country, it just absolutely shaped my experience of how I looked at education. And then not only that, I got to know people that were doing similar things all around the world, including people I still work with now. So Alan Levine was someone who taught me HTML back when I was in Mexico, although we didn't meet for another few years. It actually took me a year or two after I knew him to put that together. So I kind of just am always chasing that buzz, that ability to connect with people wherever they may be, and to draw on the work they're doing using this platform. So I'm looking for characteristics that identify those things, and I try to eliminate the things that create barriers to those things. So, I mean, I think there's kind of two answers that I kind of draw on there, and then there's kind of why it matters to us in our practice. And I think a big part of why it matters is, being able to draw on the work of our peers, to be able to share work that we're doing, to draw on the work of others, to be part of collective endeavor online. These things strike me as just so essential to what teaching and learning can be. It seems almost nonsensical not to take advantage of it. If we accept that digital technology and the internet is not a fad, that it's not going to go away, I think we have an obligation to work with ourselves and our learners to ensure they have the technical skills to be fluent and confident and secure in how they practice what they do, but at the same time as well, be thoughtful about it and ethical. And then that, I think, goes to the final piece, which is why I think it really, really matters, is I think that in many senses, some of the trends we're seeing with online communication are troubling. What we're seeing with how personal data is being traded as a marketing commodity online, and what this means to people's privacies, people's safety, what the internet's influence on public discourse is. I think it's safe to say it's problematic in 2018. So to what extent do we as educators and scholars and learners have an obligation to try to not only be passive recipients of this digital world, but to make an effort to shape it and to create spaces that are more human and more like the kind of places we want to be. Well, there's so many cases, and I'm tempted to just pick really grand projects, things like Wikipedia, authoring projects where students in their teaching and learning are building public knowledge resources that are read by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, and are building an information commons and a common infrastructure that we can build on. I still get a real buzz every time I work with a student when they're working on a website for themselves, when they're taking some sort of research project and sharing it out, or building a portfolio for their work. And most weeks I find myself sitting with a student who at some point in the interaction says things like, I don't want to do this. Why would I have to build a website? This has nothing to do with my history project. And then seeing them build fluency and have fun and getting picky about the types of images that go up and the layout, and getting that sense where you can tell that they're being drawn into the experience of shaping their digital identity and getting this sense of autonomy and confidence. And then quite often at some point, seeing how excited they get when they realize that there are people reading and engaging with their work and perhaps building on their work in a way that they never imagined possible when they started out. And sometimes these are very modest interactions, but it often has quite a profound influence on the student, because the student at that point is saying, I'm not just simulating the act of scholarship here, I'm actually engaging in a global networked discourse, and my voice has value. That never gets old for me.